Well, hello again. My name is Max, and
I like sound.
so it should come as no surprise at all that one of my favorite ways to spend my time is to write album reviews. I post content regularly to magazines like Exclaim and Metal Injection, but that pesky word count often gets in the way of me saying everything I want to say about certain albums, which is why I came up with the idea for Thought Mosh. Basically, it's a bucket for me to dump all of my thoughts about an album in hopefully under 15 minutes, but also under 10 because that's what YouTube likes. Today's Thought Mosh topic is the 9th album from Architects, For Those Who Wish to Exist. Like I said, if you want my actual recommendations about this record, you can read the review I wrote for Exclaim down there. In fact, it would probably be helpful if you read that review before you watch me delve deeper into why I believe For Those Who Wish to Exist is one of Architects' most profound and interesting records to date. In order for me to do that, let me first unpack the difficult position Architects were in when they started to write this record. After rising to the top of the whole post-metalcore thing, in other words, gent riffs with Linkin Park choruses, Architects began to despise their own influence. The whole bleh phenomenon is probably the best example of this change of tune. Vocalist Sam Carter popularized this distinctive exclamation, and then it was memed out of existence. I personally think the day Bleh died was when Sworn In's ex-vocalist thought it was a really good idea to add 2 consecutive blehs in a row in that song Lay With Me. So stupid. What were you thinking? Sam's bleh might have originated from a genuine sense of artistry, but at this point he wishes he had never gone bleh in the first place. And this attitude extends to pretty much every follicle of Architects' sound. It seems like every time you blink, a new band is trying to pull off the whole
Genty breakdown with arena-ready chorus
thing. And whether you want to admit it or not, this had a cooling effect on Architects' last album, Holy Hell. And yeah, that album was generally loved by fans and critics alike, and will remain a triumphant tribute to the band's late guitarist and principal songwriter, Tom Searle. But you're fooling yourself if you think that the glut of copycat bands didn't dampen some of the light that album could have projected. It's not like Architects forced everybody to ape their sound and muddy the waters in a wake that
they discovered.
But here we are. We live in a world where one of Architects' best records feels a little bit redundant within a sea of bands riding their coattails. So what are they supposed to do now? Dance on the grave of their genre's integrity? I mean, yeah, you could try that. Or you could try to dispense with your own sonic signatures. And to me, that's what makes For Those Who Wish to Exist such an interesting album. Even if the shots it takes don't always hit, this record effectively turns the tables and shows why Architects became metalcore leaders in the first place. Okay, so first of all, let's acknowledge the non-argument of, oh my god, Architects sold out, they're not heavy anymore, where's the blah, blah, god? A deaf person could hear that Architects sounds a lot less aggressive right now, but is that really a bad thing? First of all, anybody who thinks that this band is particularly heavy in the grand scheme of things should give Primitive Man or Sheep Alba a try. We're talking about a band who gets routinely criticized for its unthreatening, sterile sound. Anthony Fantano went so far as to call it the elevator music of metal. The sample replaced drums are probably the biggest gripe people have, but you could also reference the guitar tone, which sounds like it was generated in a laboratory, or the vocals, which totally sound like they were done in one take, except
Not at all.
what some people might call overcorrection is exactly why Architects is the perfect band to cross heavy music with pop music. Really, the only thing you would need to do is add a bit more hooks and get rid of some of the blah. That's really an apt summation for what's happening on For Those Who Wish to Exist. There's literally not a single blah on the entire record, and only Discourse is Dead really gets close to the usual mosh-worthy metalcore that the band has been known for. And perhaps it only stands out that much because the rest of the record takes a very noticeable detour. A band getting rid of its stylistic hallmarks tends to result in musical antimatter. Looking at you, asking Alexandria. Unless the band replaces those hallmarks with something with legitimate staying power. And to that effect, Architects made sure that all the new stuff they brought to the table was actually good, for the most part. The dramatic, swelling ballad Dead Butterflies is a great branching off point.
I wanna bother God.
Its effectiveness boils down to one word: big. Even without the orchestral additions, this thing sounds freaking massive. But adding that extended instrumentation brings the whole thing to a new level of grandeur. You got brass, strings, and choirs. And best of all, it's all real. That's right, no
MIDI mumbo jumbo here.
And this big budget flair helps the band make up for a lack of heaviness with a convincing sense of scope. And on top of that, Dead Butterflies made me a full believer in Sam's more croony vocal style. It's really a perfect counterpoint to his sing screamy Chester Bennington style. And speaking of that, we should probably talk about Black Lungs now. This track epitomizes Architect's brand of Linkin Park core. It gets rid of everything that made Hybrid Theory kind of dated by comparison these days and replaced it with some metalcore bombshells. It's definitely less violent than before, but who cares about less violence if you have catchiness on your side? Not to mention the fact that that breakdown absolutely
Slaps.
Animals and Meteor highlight drummer Dan Searle's rebellion against the metalcore double bass trope. At this point, double kick is pretty much synonymous with metalcore, and metalcore drummers are based on how well they can go da-dee-dee-da-dee-dee. Dan saw everybody trying to go and thought, well, screw it, here's a 4 on the floor beat. And this decision actually does a lot to change the feel of a lot of these songs, whether it's the quasi-industrial feel of Animals or Meteora vibe. It gives Sam a lot more room to explore his knack for writing fun, memorable choruses. And Adam Christensen and Josh Middleton get to explore different guitar ideas that they never would have been able to if the rhythm section hadn't changed the way it did this time around. So at this point, you're probably thinking,
Max, you sound like you absolutely love this record. How come you rated it a 7 out of 10?
well, Little Wonder happened. I think I actually hate Little Wonder, but I'm also kind of fascinated by it, so let's talk about it. The blaring brass lines and up-tempo alt-rock feel kind of remind me of Meteora meets Of Monsters and Men. I think those two sounds should stay very far away from each other, and now that they're combined, it is painfully corny. My fascination comes when the lyrics go kind of meta by saying,
I wanna sing you a different song, one that's easier to swallow.
It's like Architects acknowledging on record that the song they wrote is embarrassing. So did Architects write Little Wonder as a sacrificial lamb to comment on the senseless drivel that the masses crave? Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it's absolutely awful. So yeah, Little Wonder is pretty much excruciating, but it's also the only overtly offensive part of this album. Even though the drifting, dreary progression of Demigod offers a lot less in terms of exciting songs and lyrics, the extended instrumentation offers so much for its impact. Whether it's the lonesome piano passages or these sweeping string arrangements. The ambitious instrumentation of a lot of these songs helps to make them enjoyable even if they're not an instant stunner. We also have to talk about electronics and how well they incorporate into this album's sound. Electronica and metalcore have combined before, but the advent of crunkcore is proof enough that it doesn't always work out that well. Sure, bands like Devil Wears Prada did it pretty tastefully, but for every Prada, you have a jillion bands that were just bad. That includes Stick Stickly. I don't care how many X-Scene kids want to tell me how influential that song was. It was cringy then, and it's cringy now. But you know what's not cringe? Architects writing a legitimately enjoyable electropop slow burner. Flight Without Feathers has atmosphere and sonic layers to boot. If you showed this song to an actual fan of kind of dreamy electropop music, they'd probably dig it. And then you can switch to the album's black music just to mess with them. You can compare this song to Crush off of the latest Periphery album. Granted, the Periphery song sounds fine. It just sounds like it would have been popping several years ago. The point being, Architect seems to have their ear to the ground as far as what's relevant to music now, outside of their usual style, which is why a deeper cut like An Ordinary Extinction actually sounds really natural when it provides a bunch of futuristic synth arpeggios over its muscular riffs. Several members of the band actively contribute the electronic beats and production and synths into this album, and it sounds that way too. Other bands would just let the producer throw some synths over the top of it to make you think they're trying something different. But these Architect songs wouldn't work half as well if the band didn't decide to add these extra ornamentations, which is why the electronics still work so well on the heavier song Discourse is Dead. It's not like, here's your metalcore, and now here's your pop. The song Giving Blood actually centers around a very distinct synth line, but the more nuanced soundscapes of a song like Libertine proved just as vital to the song's effectiveness. The extra keyboard layerings do a lot to increase the size of these recordings, just like the orchestral elements do. In fact, the combination of real and synthetic instrumentation is part of what makes the intro and outro tracks so engrossing. If the buoyant ambience of Do You Dream of Armageddon feels like a movie's opening theme, then the delicate acoustics of Dying Is Absolutely Safe embody the end credits. The two songs bookend this album with expansive symphonies. Kind of like that band Red that elevated the whole post-grunge nu metal combination of the early 2000s by adding real, epic string arrangements to what they were already doing. You could also liken Architect's electronic sensibilities to a cutting-edge act like Sleep Token. Yeah, it's that enjoyable. Dying Is Absolutely Safe also embodies a heartfelt resolution to the grapplings with grief that defined Holy Hell, as well as this album's frank appraisal of a broken, virus-ridden world. And that's the final kudos I will give for Those Who Wish to Exist. It's actually about something. It has a place in the Architect's catalog. I don't want to bring up Asking Alexandria's terrible self-titled album again, but come on. All they did was complain about how
Rock music doesn't take chances anymore.
while writing uninspired pop music. Architects avoided that pitfall by centering this album on mankind's tendency to actively participate in its own downfall. I mean, yeah, it's basically the whole
We live in a society.
meme, but it's really lines like this that take the cake for me.
Bury your head in the sand and you'll be feeling the fangs. So sleep with two eyes open. Catch yourself by the candlelight.
Listening to lyrics like this makes it pretty clear to me that Architects didn't want to just write a pop record so they could break into the mainstream and rake in all the cash. They wanted to make a statement with this record. I'll take this any day over something embarrassing like,
Oh my god, man, rock music sucks these days. Let's make horrible pop music and pass it off as our most mature record to date.
it's this pursuit of meaning and chaos that makes Dying Is Absolutely Safe such a fitting ending for this album. Considering the fact Holy Hell was in part a eulogy for a fallen brother, it's actually really wholesome to hear the band being so self-aware after such a harrowing emotional journey.
It takes a fierce grace to crack us open. A moment's up without sentencing.
So to conclude this video, I will say this. It's totally acceptable to wish certain bands would keep being good the exact same way over and over again, but that's kind of an unfair way to treat the situation for a few reasons. Number one, the idea that a band can only be good in the way you want or expect is absurd. You should take stylistic divergencies on their own terms. In other words, does Architects pull off what they wanted to pull off? And I would argue that the production value alone of this record is enough to elevate it above the usual ploy for mainstream acceptance. Number two, don't you lie to my face and suggest that you wouldn't endlessly complain about Architects releasing Holy Hell clones for the rest of their existence. They probably knew this record wasn't going to sit well with certain fans and would probably really tick off their critics. But considering their other option was seeing how long they could tread water, I'm glad they decided to take a chance. And while I don't entirely love this record, I think it's fair to say that Architects took a chance and won. And so ends my first Thought Mosh. Thanks to everybody who made it to the end of the video. If you like this whole Thought Mosh concept, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe so you can be aware when I make more of these. I want to specifically shout out my good friend Josh Durant, who provided me with some beats to play under my bloviating. He's a really awesome musician and I have his links down in the description. Please give him a listen. He would really appreciate it and I would appreciate it and you'll appreciate it because it's good. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want to keep up with my writing or if you have a taste for vinyl posting, and it's all linked down there in the description and I appreciate any support you guys can give me. All right, that's enough from me, I think. I'm going to go ahead and listen to this record before my wife comes home. Stay safe out there and please get vaccinated. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.